Coming to you live from an abandoned storage locker somewhere in Mesa, Arizona. You're tuned into the Important Nonsense Podcast with Steve Bonham.
Attention, Alan Hearn's mom. His knee is better. You can stop worrying.
And Neil Smith.
Even with the concussion, as long as he's cleared, probably don't have a better option.
Ooh, boom shakalaka.
Welcome in. The Important Nonsense Podcast. Steve Bonham, Neil Smith. It is week 17, which is very weird to say is the week that matters. Still, just mentally have to adjust to that after so many years of it just being the throwaway garbage week.
Well, then the NFL made us work an extra week unpaid, Steve. That's the reality of what's going on here. We have to work one extra week every year now just to satisfy the league. So yeah, welcome to it.
But the long and short of it is, for this episode here today, we're going to be just talking about long-term future. Like, really, there's not a lot of news this week in terms of like actual, real, actionable stuff to work on. That's more going to be
through all the COVID inactives and reactivates, but I feel like there's a better use.
They literally said over 100 players today were reactivated from the COVID list, either from active roster or practice squad. So it doesn't matter.
The only advice I have is if you have a player with
if
COVID,
you had a starter who was out before,
check.
That's
just
back.
Check your lineup.
That's it.
Check your lineup and see if they were activated, because there's
even then, Carson Wentz, which is kind of the only news of the week, went on to the league protocol yesterday, but with the new protocols in place, he can be back for this Sunday. So we don't even know for sure. So the only
those 95
COVID list
passing yards he'll have for you, he himself.
Well, it matters if you've got Michael Pittman. It matters if you've got Jonathan Taylor, because who's handing off to Jonathan Taylor 50 times a game? Is it going to be Carson Wentz or is it Sam Ehlinger? Who is it? That's what we need.
Who will be throwing wobbly off-target passes to Michael Pittman? Is it Carson Wentz or is it Sam?
Exactly. So really, that's all it is. It's monitor that situation. If your starters are healthy, you play your starters. You don't get cute about it. But what we're going to talk about here today is we're going to start looking ahead to 2022. So either you're in the championship this weekend and good luck, or you're not and you're already focused on next year, either from a dynasty perspective or from a redraft perspective. So let's start with where the money is made, Neil. Running back. So running backs right now, according to the ECR on Fantasy Pros, the top tier, I don't know what you want to call them, quote unquote, clear cut, right? The number one tier in dynasty rankings at running back is number one, Jonathan Taylor, obviously. But then number two is Christian McCaffrey, and number three is Alvin Kamara.
I'd like to pause and just go back to why you didn't just call it the big three, which is tier one of running back. Not that I necessarily agree with it. It just happens to be three players, because I have the same list in front of me right here. And it's funny because
this isn't tight end, where tight end is the big three, because you have the big three and then the cliff. Everything after that you don't care about. Whereas with running back, normally, like this year, it was the top five. Really, it was the top five guys. Any of them you felt good about if you came out of your draft with them. And then beyond that became the question of, all right, do I go for one of the second tier running backs, or am I looking at Stephon Diggs, Devante Adams, and who was the third guy in that mix this year that I can't remember, which is a good sign for how he did this year.
DeAndre Hopkins.
Was it DeAndre? I don't think it was DeAndre Hopkins.
I believe it was. It was either that or was it Justin Jefferson?
No, Jefferson was like 5. This is really going to bother me. Tyreek Hill, I think, was.
It might have been Tyreek Hill this year. Yeah. No, it might have been Tyreek Hill this year. See, I blocked that out because
you and I just don't agree with it. That's probably why.
I just mentally tuned that out. I've stopped listening to that after years.
Let's see, who was it? Yes, Tyreek Hill is the correct answer. Okay. That's what it was. Right. But yes, so for me, I felt like it was a top 5 in running back this past season. I feel like it's probably closer to that this year. The shocking one to me is Christian McCaffrey. Like, I understand he's only 25 going on 26, but is he still in that big top 3 category for you right now?
No, I was actually more, because we're talking strictly dynasty, right? For the moment. Okay, because it's the answer changes slightly when you're talking about dynasty versus redraft, but not that much. Just what I was going to kind of go into there is, honestly, I'd probably move Najee Harris up into that big three just because of age. And Christian McCaffrey would drop down a tier. At this point, he would get closer to Dalvin Cook, who they have let's just call it 7. It's 7 overall. So Christian McCaffrey goes down to that kind of area. I understand Cook is older, but at this point, do we not have to kind of start conceding the idea that the Panthers cannot possibly, for the long-term health of Christian McCaffrey, aspire to put him back in there at his normal workload? I have to think you're going to have to find some sort of other option that isn't Amir Abdullah or Chuba Hubbard, something that's going to actually help and go to more of a split system, which kind of drives him down a little bit for me. So I don't know. How do you feel about it? Would he still stay cemented in your top three, the big three, as it were?
I mean, me personally, no.
Yeah, me personally, well, that's kind of why I want to move Harris up there.
That's why it's confusing to me because, okay, so let's look at these also from just overall, the next tier, right? So these were updated, by the way. The most recent update was yesterday. And this is taking all the experts, 87 available. So updated as of yesterday. And you've got Taylor, McCaffrey, Kamara. But after that, Najee Harris, Dalvin Cook, DeAndre Swift, Nick Chubb, Barkley. To me, a guy that I feel like, as we've talked about, should be in this conversation, has absolutely earned the right to be in the conversation, and is in tier 3, is Austin Eckler. Yeah. Like when we're talking about full PPR, I don't understand how Austin Eckler is still being considered, just barely inside of the top 10 as a dynasty running back.
Yeah, and he's sitting there right next to, he's at 18 overall. Joe Mixon is 19. And if you're asking me who I would prefer from a dynasty perspective in PPR, those two names really shouldn't be that close together.
Right.
That's not correct. Now, I will say the idea behind that could have something to do with the idea that Austin Eckler is 26 and he will be 27 at the start of next season.
Right, but he's the same age as Kamara. So,
yeah,
I mean,
fair.
If you're going to have Kamara in the top 3, what could you possibly make as the argument against
Let's double check something, because you know what I don't know immediately offhand that I probably should is Austin Eckler's contract. I'm almost there. Okay, yeah, and they have a potential out year on Austin Eckler at the end of this season, and they could cut him for $3 million in dead cap, effectively. So there you go. So if they really were inclined to do that, now I will say, given how he's played this year, feel like that's not going to happen. And then he's on the Chargers for 2 more seasons. He'll be on the Chargers until he's 29 at that point. I can't imagine they would cut Austin Eckler, given how he's played this season.
No, I mean, the only thing they might do is restructure his contract if they want to do that, but I highly doubt that as well.
Yeah, because he's only going to he's only going to be making $5 million.
He's only going to make more money if you try to restructure him at this point.
Yeah, he's only going to make $5 million.
I
feel like I feel like he's going to probably get more on the open market than $5 million, given where he's at right now.
I just, to me, I don't understand how you could possibly make that argument that he should be outside of the top tier, where you've got guys like I mentioned Kamara still in that top 3. And the one to me that is the most confusing, the one that I don't understand, the one that I think we're not going to have a lot of clarity on going into next season, and he's going to float in limbo, is Saquon Barkley. He's only 24 going into his age 25 season. He is a year younger than Christian McCaffrey. He's only, think about this. He's only 2 years older than DeAndre Swift.
Right.
I mean, just think about that. He's only 1 calendar year older than Najee Harris. We talked about that in the preseason. Like, Saquon Barkley is still a young guy who has a lot of miles left, but with how he's performed and how bad that team has been, I just don't know. Like, they're going to have an entire turnover this offseason. No more Gettleman, probably not Joe Judge going forward.
I mean, I don't know. Did you see the news report saying that both Joe Judge and Daniel Jones are coming back for one more ride next year?
Yeah, but that was a Gettleman decision. Is he coming back?
It seems to be.
I mean,
Look, I'll put it to you this way: would it shock me if the Giants decided to keep the band together for
if it
one
was
more
status
season,
quo,
for one more season to try and run this back one more time, and then if that doesn't work, then everybody's fired?
right?
Would it really shock you? See, that's
No.
the thing. I don't think that would shock me at all because you've still got. I believe this would be the last year of Daniel Jones's contract. I'm looking that up right now as we speak.
Yeah,
So
they're putting in the option. So this was the 4th year. No, this was the 3rd year.
Yes,
so,
that's what I'm getting.
So he's going into his 4th year. They have to choose if they're picking up the option or not for 2023, and they said they were going to pick it up.
Yeah. So they said they're going to do that. I don't know if they're actually going to necessarily do that. That's the thing. They say that, but we'll see about that. So, because this coming up is the last year of his rookie deal, so they have a choice to make. So, to be honest with you, if he plays bad enough, they might decline the option. It's rare though that you would get a quarterback in the 1st round and then not pick up the option. They almost always do.
So this might be a fun way to look at it as well. As you know, as I've talked about several times on our shows here and different platforms, wherever I get the chance. Love the guys over at Player Profiler, everything we've done with them, and the information that they provide and the analytics that our guy Josh Larkey does. So if we were to compare the ECR to what their rankings are, where are the biggest discrepancies? I think that also might be an interesting exercise to kind of look through as, how far off is the general public to how the analytics crowd might actually take a look at it here. So we talked about the top 3 being Taylor, McCaffrey, Kamara, with Najee Harris at 4. Najee Harris is actually the number 2 guy for Player Profiler, with DeAndre Swift at number 3.
Well, that's age related, right? For both Harris and Swift, because they've still got more or less their entire career in front of them.
Right. And then same deal. At number 4 right now, based on pure dynasty value, they're saying it's Antonio Gibson.
Again, the same age as those guys.
Yep.
Right. That was the same class with Swift and Gibson, I believe.
Yeah. And Gibson is 12 in the Fantasy Pros ECR, and it followed immediately by one of the ones that's going to be one of the bigger talking points this whole offseason, Javonte Williams at number 5 on Player Profiler. He's currently number 15 on the Fantasy Pros ECR for Dynasty ranking. And that in large part is due to Melvin Gordon. Mm-hmm. Melvin Gordon's at the end of his deal. They have said that they love Melvin Gordon on the team and they love having the 1-2 punch. Are they really going to bring him back? If he wants to sign at a veteran minimum, are they going to bring back?
Oh, we're just going to do
Gordon?
We're going to do Narrative Street.
Yeah.
Which at least for now will be the segment of the show and not the entire show like it will be next year. Right. Sure, we'll do Narrative Street. See, I don't think they're going to be able to afford that because if they're going to try and spend anything that isn't nailed down is gone because they need every dollar they can get to go and try and make a play for Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson. Because if you do that, suddenly you're a playoff team.
Right.
You're a playoff team overnight. All you need is a quarterback. And you have all the ancillary pieces that you could ever want.
Let's be real. If you do that, you're the Buccaneers, right?
Yeah.
Look at the Bucs who went 8-8 2 years ago, and then they went out, did everything they could to recruit and sign Tom Brady, and then they win a Super Bowl because the defense was just good enough.
And the defense is good.
Yeah, and you've got the pieces on offense. You just need a QB to guide the team. And that's basically where the Broncos are right now. So I 100% would agree with that.
So I don't think there's going to be any money left for a Melvin Gordon. I think Melvin Gordon will enjoy his time in, New Jersey. Why?
I don't know. See, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if Melvin Gordon going to Denver was kind of his, I'm a free agent, I'm going to cash in. Remember,
he also wanted to stick it to the Chargers.
Yeah.
That was a bonus. He got to stick it to the Chargers.
Well, yes. But he wanted to hold out in LA so he could get more money and get paid. Then they just stuck with Eckler, and we have seen how that's gone.
I was going to say, seems like a pretty good choice.
Right. We've also seen guys like Devonta Freeman who have gone on the market and said, no, I'm a starting running back. I'm only signing to be a starter. And then his career is basically over. He's bounced team to team to team to team, and he's still making minor paychecks, and he's making the league minimum, but he is not getting paid the way he wanted to, and just holding out for a starting job did not pan out the way. that he wanted to. Same thing with Latavius Murray this season. He got cut at the end of the season or the end of the preseason because the Saints wanted him to take a pay cut.
I was going to say he was making too much money, and the Saints had no money to give, so something had to give in that arrangement.
So they gave him up. So I think it's a similar deal. I think he's going to end up signing for a minor contract, and you're going to have a situation like we saw, like I said, with Tampa Bay, where you have a bunch of veteran players signing for league minimum to be a part of a team that they think could be a real contender.
Sure. In that scenario, like let's say you could get the quarterback decision worked out with Melvin Gordon still around.
If you sign Aaron Rodgers.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. We've seen that before. The Tampa one's a good example. The Broncos themselves are also a good example with Peyton Manning.
Sure.
There were a number of guys who were ready to hang it up, and then suddenly it was, oh wait, we're getting Manning? Never mind. I'll stick around for another year or two. Let's go win a title. Like it definitely has that effect.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to sign up and play with Drew Lock the way they would love to sign up and play with Aaron Rodgers.
Right, exactly. And this is one too. Just getting back slightly on track to what we were talking about. Nick Chubb, that to me feels like an obvious one. That's a no-brainer, right? With the numbers that he's put up in his career. Yes, from a dynasty perspective, he's getting a little bit older. Derrick Henry obviously falling down the list because coming off the major injury, and now he's 28 going
just
on
the
29.
workload. Remember the time when we used to talk about Derrick Henry didn't have much tread on the tires? Those are fond memories. Those are days gone by, unfortunately.
Here's an interesting one to me, though. Joe Mixon comes in at the ECR number 10. He also comes in at player profiler number 8. So no love to push Mixon into the top 5. But when you look at the season that he's put together this year, he's really made an argument that he belongs in that conversation. And he's only 25 years old.
Yeah, that's the thing. It feels like Joe Mixon's been in the league for 50 years, right?
Yeah.
Like it feels like that's just how that's gone. No, he's only 25. So it's an interesting one, especially as the Bengals continue to get better. That's been the impressive thing to watch about the Bengals. Remember when the Bengals were like a 2-win football team for like 40 years?
That was kind of the biggest argument against Joe Mixon, right? Is they're going to constantly be in passing situations playing from behind.
But
so how often is he involved in the passing game?
And he's been more, but he's also benefiting from softer boxes because they have to respect the pass now. They can't just stack the line on him.
And
anymore.
that was our argument in the preseason with all those guys on the receiving core, you can't possibly just say, beat us with Joe Mixon or beat us with the receivers. We're not going to let Joe Mixon do it. You can't do that anymore.
And the fact that they don't really have a tight end doesn't really matter. Like they've got 2 really, really, really talented receivers and Tyler Boyd, which is good enough. Yeah. It's not, by the way, I just checked. So unlikely that this would happen, but they do have an out year on Joe Mixon this year.
Yeah.
So theoretically, it's something to keep in mind, but I really doubt they would ever. Now he is going to make quite a bit more money.
And then other guys that are also going to be mixed into it. 2 guys that were kind of in this conversation this last preseason that aren't now because of injury are J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers. They're going to get mixed into this somewhere as well. Currently, Dobbins 16 in the ECR, Akers 19 on Player Profiler. Akers comes in at 10, Dobbins at 14. And again, those are guys that young, talented, and when you look at it, this was their second year. They missed the entire season. So very limited tread on either one of them. They should both be ready to go next season with pretty much full workloads.
Well, look at Cam Akers is the one that I get why he would be 10. But I'll just say that 19 I feel is low for Cam Akers. And I don't think you have to do too much science here, right? Just look at what they've been able to do with Darrell Henderson and Sony Michel. Cam Akers is a significantly better athlete than either of them.
Right.
So as long as he can stay healthy, that's going to be the system they're going to run with Matthew Stafford. So I could see that. And then also he's very young. I know the injury was pretty gruesome, but he's very young. So if anybody could recover from it, you would think it would be him.
Yeah, he should. I mean, there's a chance he plays this weekend.
I know. That's pretty freakish. It's like Wolverine. That's like Wolverine. Like
he's 22 and a half, so he'll be looking at 23 next season. So again, very young guy, could absolutely have a good run here. And then one that's, again, going to be polarizing on the back end of this at 15 on Player Profiler and 21 on Fantasy Pros. Travis Etienne did not play a single snap of his rookie season. So now he comes back to Jacksonville and it'll be a whole new staff. Like, it's not the people that drafted him. It's not the staff that he came into the league with. It'll be a whole new coaching staff. And you were concerned about James Robinson. He just tore his Achilles. So now he is done for the season, and he will miss most of the offseason regimen. So
I was going to say,
both of them should be ready to go for the preseason and camp, but I would say it's going to be extremely difficult for James Robinson to overcome Travis Etienne in that job, in that role. So, where does he go going forward?
See, this is where it gets tough, right? Because you draft running backs every year, and this is where it gets kind of gritty because they can kind of get disposable to a certain extent.
Right.
So you would need to think about who's going to be hard up for running back next year. So where do we have guys that are going to be kind of looking to kind of turn it around? And it's like Philadelphia, I guess, but they have Gainwell and Boston Scott and Miles Sanders to the extent that it matters. But it's like,
I mean, as long as they keep with Sirianni, they have proven that Kenny Gainwell's not the guy for them.
Yeah.
So the amount of times they've made him a healthy scratch leads me to believe that is not a guy they trust long term.
Right. So okay. So then Boston Scott's a nice story, but I don't know how much you're gonna like.
I think it's far more likely they either sign someone cheap or they draft somebody.
It's something like that. But I'm just trying to think through who else would be struggling at running back entering into next year. I mean, Tampa kind of solved their problems. Miami, if they're just not sold on anything.
Yeah. Miami, Houston.
Houston's another one. So I could see Houston would make a lot of sense for James Robinson because they're gonna be looking. He's still relatively young. They're gonna be looking to kind of go young. It just depends on
no, it's not the Giants. Still Saquon, despite that. I said Texans, maybe the Jets.
The Jets is a weird one,
depending on what you believe about Michael Carter. But
it's the Michael
I've
Carter.
I've never been a Michael Carter guy.
No, but they also love Tevin Coleman because he knows their system and stuff. So they'll probably have Tevin Coleman for next year as well. Maybe longer term.
Right.
Like they love Tevin Coleman. And I think he's not even 30 yet. He's got like 1 or 2 more years before he gets there. So, and he works for nothing. So it's perfect for them and their budget. So I don't know if they would be interested in paying James Robinson. I guess it depends on how much money James Robinson commands. You would think it would be.
I mean, he's still going to be on the roster. He'll still be on the Jags.
Yeah.
So he's got, I think, 2 years left on his deal. Is that right?
Okay. I can tell you.
San Francisco and the Mod Podge that they have.
I think that's how they like it.
I don't think they're not paying James Robinson enough.
James Robinson has 1 more year.
Yeah, they're not paying him enough to let him go either, to just outright
no,
him, especially with how he's produced.
He's making $895,000 next year.
So
he'll be an unrestricted.
I gotta believe
he's a restricted free agent after that. He's an RFA. So yeah, he's not going anywhere. Not for another 2 years. That's a shame.
So I would say probably back end. Falcons. That's a good one.
Falcons is a good one.
Because Cordarrelle Patterson is not the running back of the future there.
What?
I know.
No. Doesn't that feel like
Melvin Gordon could easily slide into any of those scenarios?
Sorry, I said James Robinson before. I meant Melvin Gordon, but I got discombobulated. But hang on for a second, because now I'm just thinking about, doesn't that feel like a classic fantasy blunder for next year for trusting Cordarrelle Patterson?
Oh, your headset went out for a second there. What was that?
I said, doesn't that feel like a classic fantasy blunder? Buying into the Cordarrelle Patterson thing for next season. That just feels like a classic blunder.
Yeah.
Like I feel like we're gonna
especially once it's corrected that he becomes a running back in all formats next year.
Sure.
That especially will do it.
I said James Robinson. I meant Melvin Gordon. Right. I could see Melvin Gordon to Atlanta, by the way.
It fits what they're doing over there, which is just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Right. So there's every chance, but
all right. So let's move on.
Well, the one that I thought you'd be most interested in is the little bit lower down the list, which is AJ Dillon at like RB 29 in the ECR. I figured you might want to.
And that's all
that up a
dependent
little
too.
bit.
I love AJ Dillon. You know that. I feel like he just needs the opportunity. But now Aaron Jones just re-signed this season, so he's still on a 4-year. He's on the second year of a 4-year deal. They've at least been trading off between Jones and Dillon, splitting the workload. So I would rather have Dillon long term than Jones. Absolutely. I don't know if I'd want either one in redraft next year if they don't have Aaron Rodgers.
Right. Well, that's a whole different conversation that we'll have to get to, because at that point, what's left in Green Bay that you feel good about that really maybe Aaron Jones?
Right.
But the other one that I noticed too is a little bit further down than that. They still have Chris Carson at 31. I guess
and that's just people not updating their stuff.
People got to be updating, because I'd feel they got Chris Carson over Damian Harris on here. It jumped off the screen immediately to me. I'm like, that.
Yeah, that just has to be people that haven't updated in a while.
That cannot be right. You got to get that flipped. So.
And just for the record, on Player Profiler right now, Aaron Jones RB19, AJ Dillon RB20. So.
Oh wow.
So
that's the age difference. Yeah.
All right, let's look at wide receivers here. I mean, do you even want to look at QBs? It doesn't specifically matter.
I mean, QB is weird to do this.
I think QB is pretty easy. I mean, it's Mahomes, it's Josh Allen, it's Kyler Murray, it's Lamar, it's Justin Herbert. And then beyond that, what? Dak and Joe Burrow?
That's what's next on the list. And then they've got Russell Wilson there, but I don't agree with that. And then you start getting into, like I said, it gets really weird at quarterback, whereas I feel like in quarterback, my advice would be, look, just get something between tier 2 and tier 3, because realistically, it doesn't make much difference. It doesn't really
because after that, I would have Jalen Hurts.
Sure,
because realistically, there's a chance this weekend that if everything bounces their way, the Eagles can clinch a playoff spot. The Eagles. Yeah. Yes, those Eagles, they can clinch a playoff spot.
With their terrible defense.
With their horrendous defense and their lack of a running game. And
that isn't Jalen Hurts.
And Jalen Hurts erratically passing the ball. Cannot play football, right? He's not an NFL quarterback, but he has taken this team to currently 8-7 and almost a playoff berth. So if they make the playoffs this year, you can't possibly tell me that Jalen Hurts is not the quarterback for at least next season in Philadelphia.
Because that's the only reason Jalen Hurts isn't in some sort of top 5 type thing.
Right. The idea that they're going to go after Deshaun.
Yeah, that's the scary thing that I think people are. But we talked about this all off season and then even throughout the season. At some point, Jalen Hurts had to start winning football games. Out again, Neil. Interesting.
Might be having a connection issue over there.
I don't know what's going on with that. Can you hear me now?
You got it. Yep.
All right. Well, it's working now. We talked about it in the offseason, and we talked about it all through the season. At some point, fantasy points are great, but Jalen Hurts had to actually start winning football games.
Right.
So now that he's gotten close, and look, cynical people could make the argument that they've gotten to 8 wins despite Jalen Hurts. Now, I'm not making that argument. I'm just saying if you were very cynical, you could make that argument. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's not debatable. If Jalen Hurts, just like you said, if Jalen Hurts takes you to the playoffs, he's the quarterback. You can't realistically tell me that he's not going to be starting there next year. I don't know that they're going to have the capital to go after Deshaun anyway. I've heard those rumors as well. I think if Deshaun is going to end up anywhere, my money is on Miami. Yeah. It's the one that showed the most legitimate interest.
Right.
They want all kinds of crazy guarantees from the league that they're never going to get. But they're the ones that have actually.
Well, they'll get those guarantees once the trial's over in February. But
yeah, we'll see how that all ends, and then we'll see if there's a criminal thing. Because if there's no criminal thing behind it, and the matter gets settled, I don't think anyone will care anymore. It'll be old news.
Yeah, but other than that, there's not much that's super appealing right now.
No, I mean, they got Trey Lance as top 10, which I guess is predicated completely on the idea that he's going to be the starter for them next year.
Right.
Everything else more or less makes sense the way that the ECR has it. I mean, you could nitpick this list to death if you really wanted to, like the fact that they have Tua over Jalen Hurts, which I know that's just insanity. But other than that, I mean, there's not too much. That's really all there is to it. You just try and find yourself a quarterback somewhere in tier 2 and tier 3.
Yes, that is correct.
That
Eagles
is correct.
Will have
by the way.
3 first-round picks.
Yes.
And it was 3 picks in the top 10, and then they started winning games, and it was,
I know. Yeah.
Pushed them out.
When it was 3 picks in the top 10, by the way, I was also really worried about Jalen Hurts. It's like, oh no.
Yeah.
They'll just draft a quarterback with one of these 3 picks and he'll be gone. But then, see, here's the other thing. The other reason I'm less scared about Jalen Hurts than I think a lot of people other teams will have seen what he's been able to do. I mean, you can't tell me that there's no way that he wouldn't, even if he was released by the Eagles, that he wouldn't somehow find his way onto another NFL roster pretty much immediately. And probably, given anyone who's willing to take that shot, probably competing for a starting job.
Let's see. Trying to look at exactly where they are right now.
Oh, the Eagles picks?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. So as of right now, they have the Dolphins pick, which again, the Dolphins going on that crazy win streak.
Not getting better.
So right now, that's the 19 pick. Then the Eagles have their own pick, which is 20. And then they also have the Colts pick because of the Carson Wentz trade, which again, because of the crazy win streak they've gone on, is now like 26, 27. So they have 3 picks on the back end of the first round.
It's not exactly prime time to be.
It's not what it was the first 5 weeks of the season.
No. That was looking really good. Now, you still get 3 first-round picks, though.
Sure.
But honestly, at that point,
moving over to wide receiver, it's a little bit better. Their first tier top 3 are Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Devante Adams. You know where we both have issue with that.
Yeah, I like how you said 3, even though there's 4 names here on the page because we don't.
I only have 3.
Oh no, there's 4 in tier 1: Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Devante Adams, Jamar Chase.
Yeah, see on mine, Chase is in tier 2.
Okay,
so it may just be looking at like a different group of experts there.
Possibly, but
let's see. Yes, I am looking at just updated in the last month.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, either way, I like this one better, and you got to put Jamar Chase in that.
Yeah, I would move Chase up again. Even with when we look at a player profiler from a dynasty perspective, you've got Chase moves up to 2 behind Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill all the way down at 9 where he belongs. He's going into his age 28 season. He has proven that his boomer bust days are behind him. It's mostly bust at this point. So just to have him still in the top 5 is ridiculous to me. The interesting one there is Devante Adams. I would absolutely agree with Adams still being in his prime and a top 5 guy if it's Aaron Rodgers. But
yeah, there's
where
no
does
reason
he play?
to change that. That's the question.
Where does he play? Who's his quarterback?
Because if he's staying in Green Bay and you're telling me that Jordan Love is his quarterback, that's not Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
Not even close.
And so, do we get into a making the parallels here? Do we get into a Miami Heat situation where LeBron wanted to go somewhere where he could also play with his BFFs, Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade? Is that what we're talking about now with Rodgers and Adams, who both signed deals that would get them out at the end of this season so that they could both move on?
It would depend.
And see, that's what I was going to say too.
Yeah,
we've got the comment here. I
see, there it is. That's
the problem is they just paid all that money to Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton, and they already have Jerry Jeudy on his rookie deal.
They can't afford it. They
outside of a trade, a sign and trade situation, they can't afford to bring in another wide receiver. So if we're talking about Rodgers going somewhere to a team that has money that can afford to bring in a wide receiver, I mean, you're looking at a bottom of the barrel team that just has a ton of money to throw away.
Well, yeah, it would depend on where Aaron Rodgers wants to go, right? And then they'll work that out together. And then I guess then you would pivot Denver probably over to trying to entice Russell Wilson. Seems to be the backup plan. But that would be hard to do, right? To get both of their numbers on any team that's currently built the way Denver would be to actually attempt to make a meaningful playoff push.
Let's see. So, yeah. All right. So teams that have the most cap space currently for the 2022 season, number 1 is Miami.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So again, they still have Tua. But if you wanted to trade Tua somewhere,
Yeah, that would be what you'd probably have to do.
and then you sign Rodgers and Adams in free agency, Adams just takes over for the Will Fuller spot that he never actually had this season. And then your 1-2 punch is Jalen Waddle on the outside and Devante Adams on the other side with Parker in the slot and Aaron Rodgers throwing you the football.
Yeah.
And you've got the defense that has carried you to a 7-game win streak. So
you can figure out a running back along the way.
I mean, I feel like that'd be the most logical way to do it, because beyond that, it's the Chargers, Jags, and Bengals who all have young talent already. You've got Washington would have the most money after that.
Washington's going to attempt to do something. I just don't know if they're going to be able to convince Aaron Rodgers and Devante Adams to show up. So I don't know if that's going to happen. Washington, I think, will try and sign a veteran quarterback, though.
Did they sign Fitzpatrick to a 1-year deal? Is that what that was?
I believe that's how that worked. So, I mean, I guess theoretically they could bring him back, but we all know that it's not Taylor Heineke.
Yeah. So right now it's the whole defense is coming back, plus Antonio Gibson, and they have $60 million with Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson.
Yeah.
So if you add Adams and Rodgers to that roster in a division that's really just the Cowboys and no one else, I mean,
Ryan Fitzpatrick was a 1-year, $10 million flat deal. That's it.
Yeah.
So they're done with that.
Yeah. So if you sign Rodgers and Adams in Washington next year with that defense in that division, given the opponents and strength of schedule they're going to be up against, yeah, they can absolutely tear through the NFC and have a legitimate shot to win it all next season.
Yeah, they can go play Tom Brady in an NFC Championship game.
Yeah, and then beyond that, it's the Seahawks who have their own issues. And then you're getting into the Jets, the Broncos, and the Steelers.
You know what I just thought about? At that point, Terry McLaurin would finally get to play with a real quarterback.
Right.
If you did that, your 1-2 punch would be Devante Adams and Scary Terry.
Finally, yeah.
That would be disgusting. That would be really hard to deal with.
It would. 100% hard to deal with. Let's see. Is this not giving me a scrolling option? There we go. Yeah, for all intents and purposes, Ben Roethlisberger's retiring next season. So when
he's retiring to the league is retiring from him is up for debate. But
if he were to retire, they would have $53 million. So at that point, you could theoretically sign Rodgers and Adams with their defense. But then it's the same thing, right? Like, you're going to let Juju go. So do you move Johnson into the slot and then play Claypool and Adams on the outside?
Well, in that scenario, probably. Because Adams is always going to play on the outside, and Claypool's your speed guy.
I mean, he moves around the field pretty effectively.
It's true. That's true. He does. They actually probably would continue to rotate him and Deontay Johnson, I bet.
But again, I mean, that's another team that could afford to do it and would immediately become a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, because their defense is worse. Their defense is worse than some of the other ones.
That's kind of the hypothetical you have to run, because if he doesn't reunite with Aaron Rodgers, what situation does he go to where you still feel confident about what Devante Adams can do? Does he sign with Kansas City and play on the other side, and that's just what it is?
I would think Devante Adams would probably be trying to get paid.
Yeah.
So does Kansas City have the money to do that effectively enough? I mean, they'll make an offer, but I don't know if it's going to be the one he would take.
They have $29 million in cap space, but barely anybody signed.
Yeah, that's kind of the issue, that Kansas City is going very rapidly into cap hell in the next year or two. So I don't know if it's going to be Kansas City. I would think, and they already have issues.
Like,
so
Washington has 35 players of their 53-man roster signed. So they could give a bunch of money to those guys, but then you're taking a lot of veteran minimum contracts.
Sure.
Whereas the Steelers have 44 players under contract next season.
Yeah, they have
basically a full team coming back, and you could just swap out Roethlisberger for Rodgers and profit.
Yeah, and then use the rest of the money you had left over to try and sign Devante Adams. It's believe me, they're going to do something, because they're not in a position. They know, they're smart enough to know they're not in a position that they can like tear it down and rebuild through the draft.
Yeah, Miami
they're going to
makes
have
the most sense, I think.
They're going to have to do something like that. I don't know who it'll be exactly. It might not be this wombo combo of Rodgers and Adams. If you decouple them it might be easier to get Adams under a number somewhere that could be enticing on a relatively competitive team. But if they're going as a package deal, to your point, it does limit your options to a certain extent. You can't.
And again, as it currently stands, the Green Bay Packers next season have 43 players on their active roster, and they're negative 37 million against the cap. So,
and they're already devoid of a lot of skill position players still.
Right.
Where it's like,
I mean, if they don't win it this year, they got to make a lot of tough decisions and moves that are going to really cause Rodgers to want to be out anyway. I just find it hard to believe he ends up back with that team next season. You never know, but it'd be difficult. And then I don't see, like I said, outside of those ones I mentioned.
Man, I think he burnt those bridges. Those bridges, I think, are just burnt. And he just showed
theoretically,
up for
Houston could afford it, but would you really want to go to Houston?
I mean, maybe if my buddy Devante is coming, and I think I'm that good. Like, I suppose
he played for all those years with a terrible defense. I
think he would want to stay in the NFC. To be honest,
yeah, the NFC is the easiest path to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think Washington made a lot of sense, to be honest, because Washington is in a situation where he could pretty much show up and start calling the shots from day one. So it's like, would Dan Snyder allow that? I highly doubt it, but you never know.
Right.
Like if he can win.
Mr. J-Mac, we are talking about dynasty rankings long term. Currently talking about wide receivers. And that has gone down the path of Devante Adams. Where does he play next season? How does Aaron Rodgers affect that? And where is the money?
And do they go as a package deal or do they go their separate ways?
Yeah.
Is the question.
And I think the Steelers make the most sense. So does Washington, but Miami to me is the spot. If he can make that work, because Miami can recoup stuff with getting Tua in a trade. Or if you don't want to even trade him away, just let him sit behind Rodgers.
Well, I think they probably would trade him. Well, it's tough to say, but I would say this: Miami seemed very invested in that whole Deshaun conversation. But if that falls apart, then I could see that because we have to wait until February.
It's finding somebody that would want Tua is the whole issue. Like, where does he go?
I think you might be able to find a spot for Tua. We just talked about Washington.
Yeah.
What does Washington have that would be better than Tua? I know you don't think much of Tua, but
that is exactly correct.
That's what I would do too if I'm Devante Adams.
Yeah, if I'm Adams, I'm not signing anything until Rodgers signs.
I know where my bread
100%.
I know where my bread is buttered.
You absolutely want to know where he is going before.
I got a cell phone. Text me. Text me, Aaron. Yeah, if I'm Devante. Come on.
And that's why I was saying maybe it's a package deal because they've already talked about the fact that they want to play together. They've enjoyed playing together, so.
Well, you can't deny the chemistry, right?
Yeah.
What they've been able to accomplish together, like they might as well keep it together. If I'm Aaron Rodgers too, and I'm pushing 40, do I really want to learn how to work with all these new receivers?
Right.
Or do I just want my friend there? Yeah. No, it's just going to be easier if I have my guy.
So after Jamar Chase, which we agree on, CeeDee Lamb, I believe we also agree on that as well. The flashes we've seen.
Yeah.
AJ Brown. Boy, it's so difficult. Like, I get the hype behind AJ.
You know, I love AJ Brown. This is
I understand it. I totally get it. If this wouldn't even be a conversation if AJ Brown had a quarterback not named Ryan Tannehill.
Sure. No, I totally get that.
If he was playing on somebody that wasn't Tennessee, it would be an entirely different conversation.
But look at all the targets he gets at Tennessee because no one else wants to do it.
Yeah, but look how much it matters. I mean, he gets the targets, but if you can only catch 3 of them because only 3 of them are within 5 yards of you,
that does hurt the side. That does hurt the side a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's unfortunate because it's tough because I know I bet I can try and read into the future here because I know they have AJ Brown in the ECR over Stephon Diggs and Cooper Kupp, which I figure that's not how your list would work. I don't think that's kind of what I've always figured. It's tough.
I would still probably have AJ Brown ahead of him. It's just when we're talking dynasty, it's age.
I know.
Like AJ Brown going into his age 25 season.
Well, and again, AJ Brown was
Diggs
the number
about to be
1.
29.
But think about that. After all the adversity AJ Brown went through this year, and he still had a decent enough season, if you ask me. But after all the adversity, he was the number 1 receiver in dynasty coming into this year, and he fell 5-6 spots.
Yeah.
So it's like it's still age. And look, Ryan Tannehill can't be the quarterback there forever, Steve. He
Right.
can't. They got to figure out something else at some point, especially given how god awful he's looked this year. What a fun story Ryan Tannehill was, the reclamation project, but I think the bloom is off the rose on that one. The problem is that they're so far up against the cap that doing anything about it with somebody not Ryan Tannehill will be financially problematic.
Right. And just again, my greater point has always been with AJ Brown, like has the talent. He's like physically has the ability to do everything you'd want him to do. But again, this season, just what he's had to deal with, he missed 3 games because of injury in or 4 games in the 11 games that he actually played. He had 3 top 5 performances and every other performance was outside of the top 20. It's
Ryan Tannehill's fault.
Yeah, exactly. If they ever got
because injury prone's not a thing, Steve. So we can't go on that.
Yeah. If they ever got an actual QB to throw him the ball, he'd be great. And he's still technically 3 years away from his wide receiver prime. So they've got time to find a real quarterback.
Yeah, I was going to say they'll find something.
So certainly an asset worth holding on to. But after that, for me, big question mark, both behind him in the ECR and on Player Profiler. In their top 5, they have DK Metcalf.
Yeah.
And it's the same argument, right? He's 24 years old. He's a freak athlete. He's a specimen who can absolutely put up the numbers.
Ran that guy down like the T1000 last year. It was one of the most scary things I've ever seen in my life.
So he can absolutely do everything you ask him to do on the football field. But unfortunately, all Pete Carroll's asking him to do is run a straight line, move to this side, run a straight line. That's it. They're not asking him to do anything else. So until the offense gets better and the team as a whole gets better, like, what are we rooting for? DK to hit free agency? I mean, that's basically what it is at this point.
DK to somehow be even more Calvin Johnson than he already is.
Yeah, because they refuse to throw the ball in general, whether that's Russ or not. And then, God forbid, Russ leaves in the offseason.
Well, we saw what that looked
Smith?
like. Yeah, we saw what that looked like. And that's the scary part is people want to kind of sleep on Russell Wilson, but it's like, no, you take him out of the equation, you see what that Seahawks team really is.
Right.
And it's like, oh man, it's bad.
Yeah.
And they have skated for so long on having no O-line because Russell Wilson can bail you out like that. Seattle is going to have some chickens that are going to come home to roost here if he decides to leave. And DK Metcalf won't be the only one to suffer because of that. Because to your point, where are they on your cap list that you had a moment ago? I thought they were. I don't think they have that much money now. Taking Russ off the books would probably help. But,
Seattle, they're top 7.
Top 7.
They're number 7 right now.
All right, so they got a little bit of money, and if you can get Russell off your books, then you might be able to affect some kind.
They have money, and what is it? Not only do they have money, but they have $37 million locked up in Russell Wilson.
Exactly. So you could probably.
So if they were to cut Russ, like let him go, trade him, whatever it is he wants to do, they would jump to number 1. They'd have the most money in the NFL available.
Okay. Well, there you go. Then you could at least.
But again, you've got the aging defense, the secondary that's atrocious. They have way more problems to fix than just quarterback. From a fantasy perspective, we don't care.
No.
But just from a football
we care a little bit about the
what do they do with all
we care a little bit about the O-line being bad for fantasy. But that's about it.
Yeah.
It's
yes. Mason is correct. How long does Pete Carroll have left is the real question.
Because he gets fired,
he's still the oldest coach in the NFL. So at what point does he hang it up and just say, I'm done rebuilding this team? He's trying to convince us that they've got all the pieces and this isn't a rebuild, it's a retool. Well, you're 5-10, Pete.
He's been trying to convince everybody he's 40 years old for 20 years.
Well, he's trying to convince the co-eds that for sure, but I don't know. The NFL in general.
Don't say slanderous things that are just facts. Okay, that's just a fact.
Then it's just stating facts.
It's a stone cold fact. What's also if you want to do that, what you got to do is you got to talk about Pete Carroll's burner cell phone.
Yeah, see, there you go. That's the dream. The dream is he's done this year. That's the dream.
Yeah.
If he wants to hang it up this season, and then they can sign a coach. And that's the problem too, is you need.
If he's done this year, do you think Russell Wilson's more or less likely to stay?
They owe him so much money is the problem. So it would be difficult for them to get out of that outside of a trade, I think. So it would really be him picking where he wants to go. Let's see.
And who would
Yeah,
be able
he's got a
afford it?
$37 million cap hit this season. You could
Right.
cut a $37 million cap hit this season. You could
Right.
cut him, and it's 26.
Ooh, that'll fix it.
So you'd save $11 million by
It's not
cutting
nothing.
him.
It's not nothing, but it's not.
Right. But at the same time, is Russell Wilson good enough for you to be paying $37 million this season against your cap? I mean, you have the money with keeping him for that much. If I'm going to pay $40 million to my quarterback, I'm going to do it for Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
That's
right.
That's pretty much what it is. I don't know what they can do to fix this team on the fly.
Oh, I mean,
There's just too many holes.
Yeah, if you just kind of go back to front, yeah, you've got questions at running back with Chris Carson aging, and you just keep working your way forward. Russell Wilson, we just talked about. The O-line isn't good.
The offensive line's been terrible.
It's been terrible for a decade. Yeah, and then Russell Wilson makes that matter less. And then you've got the defensive line is getting up there, still pretty good, but they're aging.
Yeah.
And then you've got the secondary, as you referenced before, which is just tire fire. So could you turn that in 1 year with $37 million? I think becomes the question.
Probably not.
I think you can make a dent in it. I don't know if it's a 1 year flip it around on a dime. They might have a year of wandering through the desert to get enough money together and you get a quality draft pick at that point. I don't know.
Yeah, but if I'm 70-year-old Pete Carroll, I was hoping.
Do I want to go through that?
Yeah.
Do I want to go through that? Probably not. Do you need any more money if you're Pete Carroll? Only Pete Carroll can answer that.
Right. All right. Let's see. Beyond that, after DK, the next guy in the ECR is Terry McLaurin. And we kind of touched on Washington already.
They'll find a quarterback for Terry McLaurin.
I think this is the low point in the peak and the valley. This is the valley. I think it gets better beyond that.
I think it would have been significantly better with Ryan Fitzpatrick all year.
But so this is an interesting one for me too. So again, we talked about age. So right now, two guys, very interesting, different situations. First, number 8 on Player Profiler, but number 18 here on the ECR is T. Higgins. So they've got two guys in the top 10 for Cincinnati. And look, they've both put up massive numbers and had great seasons this year. I'm fine with both of those guys being top 10, top 12 prospects in Dynasty, just based on their age and based on their QB that they're locked in with for, a decade now?
Probably.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So I think that's fine. Just going specifically into next season, they're going to obviously have a harder schedule than they had this year.
Sure.
But, I mean, the big thing for me is they've dominated that division that they had no right dominating. So if you're telling me they can win those 6 games fairly easily, then everything else beyond that doesn't really matter to me. I think that was the biggest test, was how do you beat those teams in there? And they just have dominated the AFC North.
They've been flattening the Ravens. Yeah. So just especially the Ravens. It's just like they got their number bad this year.
So I'm good with that one, but in the same division, Deontay Johnson, 20 in the ECR, but top 10 on Player Profiler. And again, it's age and value.
They clearly believe that they'll find some sort of answer to the QB situation that is not Mason Rudolph, because that's the only way you can get to there.
Back to 2 years ago with the Roethlisberger injury. Mason Rudolph was only connecting with Deontay Johnson. That's where Deontay Johnson came from.
That's true.
That was the year that Juju was supposed to be a top 10 wide receiver.
The little production Mason Rudolph was able to get all went through Deontay Johnson.
And everything that Mason Rudolph did was the underneath routes to Deontay Johnson, who came out of nowhere. Now, ultimately, that led to Chase Claypool getting drafted and clouding that up even further. But, I mean, look, to me, I would say Mason Rudolph is your worst case scenario, right?
Yo, gotta be.
Because right now it's him and Haskins backing up Roethlisberger. And I'd have to believe, like I just said, they're going to have the money. So if Seattle wants to rebuild and you make a trade to get Russell Wilson, then go for it. If you've got the money and you want to bring in Aaron Rodgers in free agency, go for it. If there's somebody else out there at the QB position,
I'll help you out. I'll help you out with that here. So I think Ryan Fitzpatrick will probably retire. Here's just some. I'll go real quick through them. Ben Roethlisberger, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Andy Dalton, Nick Foles, Cam Newton, Tyrod Taylor, Jameis Winston, Jacoby Brissett, Teddy Bridgewater, Marcus Mariota, Joe Flacco, Mitch Trubisky, Tim Boyle, Blaine Gabbert. It's a lot of things like that. Trevor Siemian, Dwayne Haskins.
Well, those are just the pure backups, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to find a more elegant list. Spotrac is letting me down here.
Well, those are the guys that just are purely free agents.
Yeah, I
whose
know.
Contracts expire at the end of this season. So if you're looking for example, like just best available potential QBs, like look at Matt Stafford. Like Matt Stafford from last season, not somebody that would have been in this discussion, but because he wanted a chance to win at the age he was at, then he moved on. They traded him to LA. Same deal. We didn't talk about Deshaun. Deshaun Watson will be back. He has said that he is never going to play for Houston again. They're going to trade him before the draft happens. In my opinion, Deshaun Watson instantly is the best draft prospect, quote unquote draft prospect in this class, because this is not a good QB class. So if you're looking for a quarterback, you are giving the sun, the moon, and the stars to Houston to try to get Deshaun Watson, which is kind of the whole reason that we talked about Philadelphia to begin with, because they have 3 first-round picks that they can offer. You could give up Jalen Hurts and 3 first-round picks in the same class to Houston to try to rebuild on the fly, whereas the Eagles then have Deshaun Watson to run the show for them if they feel like that's what puts them over the top. So that I think it's him, it's Rodgers, it's Russell Wilson trying to get out of that situation. And then is there anybody else that immediately comes to mind for you?
No, that's kind of those are the big 3 that are going to come available. So there's nobody else that I can think of offhand.
There's Kirk Cousins, who I know is nearing the end of his deal.
I know, and that just doesn't do much for me.
He's kind of the NFL's temporary Band-Aid. Mm-hmm. We also talked about the possibility that if somebody were to make that deal, whether it be Miami signing Aaron Rodgers or Miami trading for Deshaun Watson, Tua
enters the market
and moves into that conversation. You have Matt Ryan, who is an aging vet trying to win on a team that is absolute trash.
His contract is problematic. His contract is problematic. It's becoming less problematic the closer we get to the end of it, but that's part of the reason he's still there, is because they offered him all that guaranteed money after the Super Bowl. So he's still he was making a lot of money up until
he's making $50 million next year.
Yeah.
And it would be a dead cap hit of 40 if they were to cut him.
Which is why they won't cut him. We talked about this in this. But
if you could trade him,
then it's a different thing.
And it'd be the same thing. If you traded him after June 1, it's one of those things where he would be paid $10 million, or it would save $10 million for the Falcons against their own cap, and whoever absorbs Matt Ryan only has to pay him that $10 million that he was missing out on. So it becomes significantly more beneficial to whoever acquires him if you wait until later in the summer.
Right. So if it's going to happen, it's not.
But then it's a question of who's in that boat, who's willing to do that.
Washington. I hate to keep going back to it, but Washington comes immediately to mind. Also Denver, by the way.
Sure.
If they strike out completely on this, because they could technically afford it.
So also something to keep in mind, they picked up the 5th-year option, but Baker Mayfield is also technically in that conversation. Like right now, he's on the last year of that deal. He could theoretically get moved in the offseason and be $18 million to whoever wants to take on the last year of that, if they think that Baker's not the guy that can put him over the top.
That's a good one, because I know from talking to everybody back in Cleveland, the old stomping grounds, by and large, the pulse I get from that is they're done with Baker Mayfield. They want to try.
Well, because it's like I said, it's the same deal where Baker Mayfield, because they picked up that 5th-year option, it's a fully guaranteed deal of $18.9 million. So anybody that trades for Baker Mayfield has him for $19 million, which is relatively cheap for a starting QB, and it's a 1-year deal. So either he does it for you or he doesn't. Like if he's a Band-Aid to get you to where you want to go. So if you believe in Baker Mayfield, you could take on that $19 million. And if you make that trade before the draft happens, then all of a sudden that comes off the books for Cleveland and they jump up to $55 million, which would put them ahead of the Seahawks for 7th in available cap space. And then they're in the conversation for signing Devante Adams and Aaron Rodgers. They're in that discussion all over again with the defense that they have and building around those players. So, I mean, they could absolutely retool on the fly if they could get somebody to take Baker away from them.
Yeah, Jarvis Landry would look a lot like Randall Cobb in that scenario.
Right.
Younger Randall Cobb. Right. So it's right. that would be interesting.
DPJ would be your MVS in that offense, and otherwise it would look roughly the same.
Down to the stone hands and everything. Right.
And see, this is the unfortunate one.
Carolina
had to bring
Carolina
up the one that angers me.
Hold on, Carolina is an interesting one right
It's
now.
not an interesting one. You know why it's not an interesting one?
Because of Sam Darnold.
Because there was no chance that a QB would fall to them at 8, Neil.
No, that would never happen.
They had to make a trade the night before the draft happened because there was no way a good QB would fall to them at 8.
Nope. So
they picked up Sam Darnold and they picked up his 5th-year option. So they are paying Sam Darnold next year. The only way they're not paying Sam Darnold next year is if they were to trade him away because it's a fully guaranteed contract.
And I got to tell you, I don't know that you're going to find anybody to dance with you on that.
It's the exact same thing. They picked up the 5th-year option, same as Baker Mayfield, but now it would be $19 million for someone to take Sam Darnold off your hands, and that's not going to happen. And you're not going to cut him outright and pay him $19 million to not be on your team. So it is what it is. It's Sam Darnold again in 2022 in Carolina. Even though they need a new QB, it's still going to be Sam Darnold for one more season.
Well, that'll pretty much guarantee that they'll be bad enough to have a good pick in next year's class. Hopefully it's better.
Silver lining. Yeah. Silver lining. All right. Well, that closes out the top 10 of wide receiver, and we went through QBs. I really feel like there's no need to look at tight ends here. I mean, we know what it is. It's Travis Kelce is still Travis Kelce. Kyle Pitts, to me, is probably the one of one right now at tight end just because of his age.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is.
It's pretty much Kyle Pitts, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Darren Waller, Mark Andrews, and you can pretty much just
put Darren Waller in that conversation.
Either way, order it, take him out, then order it however you want.
Realistically, for tight end, you have to be of a certain age. It's kind of like Darren Waller came out of nowhere when he was 27. It really is what it is. You have to be established. It's a documented fact at this point that for wide receivers, their prime is 27 to 30. Yeah. That's really statistically when they boom.
By then you have an understanding of your job in a very real way.
Yeah. Well, your job, the playbook, and physically.
That's what I mean. That's the other side of it. Physically,
you've worked out enough. You've built up enough muscle that you're dominating the other side.
And then unfortunately, due to just the side effects of human aging after 30, it's very tough to continue to keep that level of muscle mass up.
But realistically, before 27, not many tight ends do anything. Then once you hit your physical prime at 27, they boom for a few seasons, and then they slowly fade away. Travis Kelce is not faded away. He continues to be there. He's 1 year older, which is why he's going to move slightly down the list for me. But it's still him and Kittle in their prime. It's Mark Andrews just now entering his prime.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kyle Pitts, who's just a freak of nature and has to be in that conversation. TJ Hawkinson, basically based on his age, could be in the argument. But do they have a real quarterback in Detroit, or is it still Jared Goff?
We didn't even talk about,
and it's not going to be the number 2 pick
because it's going to be. We went through all of those scenarios and never talked about Detroit
because it's the same thing. They're paying so much money to Jared Goff,
that
it's going to be near impossible.
Yeah,
to move on. Let's see. They're paying $31.5 million to. Or no, 31.1 million to Jared Goff next season. And the dead cap is 30.5.
Great.
So you would save $500,000 to cut Jared Goff.
What a contract.
Well, I mean, it was LA that put that.
No, I was going to say, no, I know. That's why I'm laughing. Because I'm like,
and they look like geniuses now because they sure got rid of it.
Yeah, because they got it off the books. That's why they look like geniuses, but they're idiots for writing that in the first place.
But that's what it is. I mean, they're going to take Thibodeau number 2. They're going to rebuild that defense. That's what they have to do. You have to get that defense good enough so that when the offense is finally ready to produce with a quarterback that's not Goff, that you can actually do something. I mean, so after this season, yes, Detroit becomes in the conversation. And yes, 100%. Love Josh Reynolds. Love Quintez Cephas when he comes back. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, 100%.
Amon-Ra St. Brown is the number 1 for me. And I'm on record on that going back to this preseason.
Well, and I think it's very interesting too. That's going to be part of our discussion in the offseason when we talk about the Lions receiving core, is the fact that Amon-Ra St. Brown was there the whole time and did diddly squat. Did absolutely nothing, was not usable, was not even rosterable in any format until Josh Reynolds got there. And once there was another wide receiver on the roster that defenses had to respect, all of a sudden Amon-Ra St. Brown becomes a viable option. Again, I have said several times, yes, that's his whole thing. He hates Josh Reynolds. He loves Amon-Ra St. Brown.
That's right.
Yes. He's well documented at this point.
Fight me.
Well documented.
This is my hill that I will die on. I will die on this hill.
Reynolds. I've always wanted him to just have an opportunity. I was very disappointed when he went to Tennessee because I knew that wasn't an opportunity. And then he finally got out of there and went to Detroit. And that's where I was hoping he would go. Reunited with Jared Goff, has an opportunity to put up numbers. But I think as long as he re-signs with Detroit, which I believe he will and should, with the 2 of them on the outside and Cephas over the middle, then I think that they can have a decent receiving core to go along with Swift and an okay offensive line.
It's actually one of the questions we'll stop here for just a moment. Do you think they actually draft another wide receiver?
No.
I guess you never know because it depends on what falls to you, right? But
No.
I was curious what your reaction to that would be because I've been mulling that around for a little while.
They're going to take Thibodeau at 2.
That's obviously. I didn't mean in the
secret
first
in the
round.
world.
I didn't mean in the first round.
I know, but if he falls the 1 spot past Jacksonville, then yes, Thibodeau will be their pick at number 2. And beyond that, they're just trying to rebuild that defense.
Just get every defensive player you think.
That
does feel like a Dan Campbell thing to do.
Yeah. So
there's a quality line.
They have good young pieces. Like we talked about. Reynolds is only a 4th-year player, I believe.
Yeah, he's younger than he seems because it just feels like he's been in the league.
Then you've got Hawkinson, who's only 24. You've got Cephas, who this was his 2nd season, even though he missed most of it. And St. Brown was a rookie. Then you've got our guy Swift, who's in his 2nd year.
Yeah.
You've got Craig Reynolds, who was the rookie who came up off the practice
squad.
It's
a nice story. Yeah.
And then they've still got another year of Jamal Williams under contract.
Jamal Williams isn't that old.
Their offensive line has been solid but hurt. So they just got to stay healthy. I think they're going to take depth at the offensive line. And then
I was going to say, that was Dan Campbell's whole thing
in the secondary.
We talked about that in our draft coverage. Dan Campbell's whole thing coming in was, I'm going to build it from the inside out. So he went and got a bunch of linemen, stacked them up there. So
that's the whole thing, is they're going to rebuild the entire defense from the ground up, starting with the number 2 pick. That's going to be their entire draft and focus, so that if it's good enough next season to get them to 5 or 6 wins, then they're going to be in the market for a quarterback the following year when they can let Goff go and they can move on and try to get somebody that can actually help them win games.
That's fair. That's fair.
That's why they have not been part of this conversation. But even that's why, to me, Hawkinson isn't part of this top tier conversation until Goff is gone.
Because he's got another year in purgatory.
Yeah. At least.
Realistically.
At least. Because then with Goff gone, then it's a rookie? Unless you can make a trade or sign somebody?
It depends.
You're starting all over again.
It depends. Is it 100-year-old Matt Ryan at the end of his contract for a year? I don't know.
3 years away from his physical prime at 27. So to me, he's out of the conversation really until then. Unless the QB situation drastically changes, he's not a part of it anymore.
No, most of this list.
Dallas Goedert's an interesting one.
I was going to say.
But that's the only one that's kind of
he's interesting, but I will go a little bit further down in that range. Goddard is very interesting to me. I'm not interested in Fant or Gesicki. That's no. The one that I am interested in that they have all the way down in like tier 3 is Pat Freiermuth. Did Pat Freiermuth do enough for you to move the needle in any meaningful way? I know the quarterback thing is a little scary.
It's the quarterback thing. That's it.
It's a little scary.
Yeah. I mean, he's number 8 on Player Profiler. He's in the 2nd tier. To me, again,
I think that's more right. versus
you're
what I see with
rolling the dice.
ECR.
I feel like he's got enough touchdown upside to matter, but yeah, you're really just hoping he falls in the end zone and has a connection with whoever the new QB is there. But yes, at 23 years old, he absolutely should be in the conversation.
That's what I'm saying. I view him as more of a tier 2 prospect just because he's 23. I mean, he's 4 years away from his physical prime.
He's only a year younger than Fant, but I'd still put him significantly ahead of Noah Fant.
Yeah, and it's mostly because even the Broncos don't seem super interested in Noah Fant anymore.
Right.
I don't even know how much longer he's going to be around. I think when his contract's up, they'll probably let him go because and you could make that argument whether it's Noah Fant's fault or the Broncos don't know how to use him properly. Frankly, I think it's probably a little bit of both.
Right.
But yeah, I think the Broncos are just not going to be interested in picking that contract back up. And who knows where Noah Fant goes after that, right? It's all wide open. It's all wide open at that point.
All right, but there you go. So next week we will be back. We will be talking about the hot take time machine for the entire fantasy regular season / playoffs. So we'll go over some of our biggest takes from the preseason. Yeah, Ingram, again, same deal. It's the QB situation. It's the team in general. He had flashes in his rookie year and hasn't really done much since. So he's an interesting prospect to hold on to, but he's one of those guys that has been touted as the next top 5 guy for 4 years? And
it's 4 years, and he's never done anything since his rookie year. And for Dynasty, I'm kind of over it at this point. There are younger, more sexy prospects at this point, frankly, than Evan Ingram.
Yeah, he's 27.
And so he's entering his prime, which is great. But
he's 27 going into 28. This is technically his physical prime. And he's still
I'm not really. Yeah, and he's still not doing anything. I'm just not really interested in Evan Ingram, to be honest, in a real way. There's younger, better overall. For example, I mean, we could do this really quickly on our way out the door. Would you rather take a shot on Irv Smith? I'd absolutely would.
Yep.
And I know he didn't play this year, so it's easy to forget about him, but I'd 100%
Dawson Knox.
Would you rather have Dawson Knox?
Yep. Going into his physical prime. Absolutely.
Me too. I would rather have Dawson
on a better team.
Let's go on the other direction then. Hunter Henry. I think that's close. That's where we start.
Yeah, I guess probably. I mean, he's dealing with more competition in that, receiver room. So eventually, if they ever got a wide receiver for Mac Jones, it becomes a different conversation.
Sure.
And he's really touchdown dependent, but it's a coin flip thing. At least he's getting the touchdown.
My greater point to you is that's where the conversation I think is. Yeah. And it's anything that would be higher rated than Hunter Henry, I would take immediately over Evan Ingram. And frankly, there's a couple things lower than Evan Ingram that I might even be coaxed into. So he's not super high on my list.
Yep. But like I said, Jack will be back with us next week for Hot Take Time Machine one last time this season. 2 weeks from now, we have the Fantasy Football Awards show.
That's right.
So until then, thank you everybody for watching. Make sure you're liking, subscribing. Patreon.com/important nonsense. Make sure you're jumping in on that. That's going to run through here in a couple of days. Become one of our January patrons so we can talk to you about sports betting. We can talk to you about the NFL playoffs, the lines that'll be coming through, and then gearing you up for props on
fantasy football is ending on Sunday, folks. All right. So if you want all the spiciest, hottest, and most accurate betting tips from Vishal and Mason and Steve, $1 to $3 a month, go ahead and collect those because you got to scratch that itch through the playoffs and into the Super Bowl. Come on. You can't wean yourself off fantasy football cold turkey
that quickly. Yeah.
You got to step it down. You got to step the addiction down.
And you know what? I forgot. We don't have the show tomorrow because we had the in-season finale last week. So I'll recap this real quick. Vishal is back up to number 5 against the spread in terms of accuracy. He is still number 7. Actually, you know what? He's technically in a tie. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just alphabetically. That's why he's in a 5-way tie for 4th place on the over-under lines. And the money lines, he is number 4 right now. So he is top 5 still in every single category for accuracy on Betting Pros. Mason's still number 1 on the money line by a country mile.
He's not going to lose that. It's real. I don't think he could realistically lose it. In the next 2 weeks.
He is 9th on the over-unders. So the two of them just crushing it right now.
If you want money line picks, go to Mason. He's batting an unreal clip this year.
Yeah. So again, all that information is available in our Discord. You just have to be a patron at our MVP level. So go ahead, check that out. But until next week, everybody, just keep up the nonsense.
Music for this podcast is provided by Lee Rosevere. I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!